Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be sitting down with Dr. Abdulkader Rahmo. Dr. Rahmo is a biologist. He has experience in being a professor with medical biology and is currently the CEO and CSO at SMSbiotech. I wanted to sit down with him today to find out what sparked his interest in becoming a scientist and what that journey has been like. Thanks for sitting down with me. How are you?
I'm fine. My pleasure.
Thank you. So what was it that was the catalyst of you wanting to become a scientist? Was it something that has always been there, or did you discover it at some point?
Yeah, it started actually at early years. I think it was early, during my early teenage years, I started looking into philosophy. And that was normal, I think, at that age, because everybody questions life and his environment. And I had more questions than many other people because my parents were from different descent. My mother was German, my father was Syrian, and we lived some kind of contradictions and let's say rich culture and diverse culture. So each culture has its answers to difficult problems and to how you live your life. And it was only natural that you seek the references from these two very strong cultures and answers for what becomes you, what becomes defining you. So from philosophy, I came across a specific book that's The Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. And that was a book translated into Arabic, and many of my books were actually in Arabic. Many of my philosophy books were in Arabic. And but I was at that time able to also read in German. And that book, a very big book at that time, took me by surprise, actually. I found many answers that were not available in philosophy in that book. So it gave me a hint, a strong hint, that science can deliver something philosophy was unable to do so. And I started that book I was, I think, 12 years old. It took me 2 years to finish reading it. I was reading other books, but I read that book very attentively. And before even finishing the book, I was absolutely sure that I'm going to study life from a scientific point of view. That means I'm going to become a biologist. And that was a daring proposition because nobody in my family ever studied biology. My father was a PhD in engineering. My mother did not go to college. Most people I knew were physicians or engineers or lawyers. So becoming a biologist was something extremely daring and was not very much respected, actually, at that time. I guess I spent the rest of my life to prove that it is respectable.
I would definitely say so.
Yes.
So you mentioned that your parents are Syrian and German.
Yes.
And you started reading when you were 12, and you had that aha moment of wanting to become a scientist. Were you living in Syria or Germany at the time?
Yeah, actually I was born in Syria.
Okay.
And I spent my school years in Syria. Although we had always a lot of time during the summer period to visit Germany, which we did. So we had a home also in Germany at that time, and we were intensely exposed to both cultures. my school years ended at the age of 16. I finished my high school early on. And at that time, I made the most important decisions of my life already. That is, becoming a scientist, becoming a biologist. I wouldn't say it was an aha moment. It was an aha period, you know.
Yeah.
The discovery and the conviction needed time, because when you start with philosophy, you definitely apply doubts, right? You doubt everything.
Right.
So you become an entrenched agnostic. And philosophy gives you a lot of weapons to apply that type of approach on every system. And only when you see that that system survived in your thinking, you're ready to commit your life to it. And that was with science achievable, unlike with other systems. And at that time, for example, religion took a back seat in my life, definitely.
Understandable. So you went to school in Syria. Where did you attend university?
I left Syria very soon after finishing my high school and went to France. I was planning actually on studying in France, and at that time I had a little fight with my parents, and we were negotiating whether I should become a physician or a chemical engineer. They tried to convince me on one of those, and I was resisting until the opportunity came on attending a polytechnic school. And there was one in France and another one in Switzerland. And since Zurich was closer to Munich, that's where our home was, I guess my mother had enough influence on my father to make the compromise. I go to École Polytechnique, which is a very respectable school, and study whatever I want to. So it would be biology or biochemistry at that time. And I'll be visiting Munich using the train. So it was a good arrangement for me.
Yeah.
And I ended up staying in Zurich for about 5 years at the Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule, which is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology.
Thank you for the translation. I was struggling with that one.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy attending there? I've heard some fairly famous people have attended there.
Well, the journey was difficult, and I had parents who were quite capable in terms of financing, and they funded all my study. But at the same time, I have always chosen the more difficult road. I guess I was sure that that type of commitment meant from the beginning a kind of struggle, a struggle that built a person and not weaken it. So I had always put myself into a test, and going to the Eidgenössische Technische Hochschule, or the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, meant I have to do a very difficult exam and pass that exam. And when I visited the school, they decided for some reason that I needed to do about 16 different subjects, which include geography of Switzerland and the history of the Union and whatever. And that's fine. So I did the first exam, and I failed that first exam. We had a supervisor at that time who was taking care of each student or candidate who wants to go to the school. And he was apparently impressed by my performance in the scientific subject matters and told me to reapply and again for the exam. So I told him that in my opinion that exam was not fair, and he told me the story about Albert Einstein, who tried to get into that school and failed the first time.
You were in good company.
Yes, so I looked later on, and it turns out that he failed in the same subject matter that made me fail, which is German language, or language in general. My parents, I have to say, actually pushed me in reapplying again. I was a little disappointed and felt unfairly treated. And this is, of course, what happened. So I needed to do the exam for the next time, and the next time was way easier for me, and I passed easily. So that's how I started my studies there, and it was a very good school. I enjoyed being there, and it's a quiet city, mm-hmm. quite a contrast to Paris, that I have enjoyed a lot, of course. So I guess it was quite enough to concentrate on science. And that's when I finished school over there, and I decided to go to the United States for my PhD.
And where did you attend school here in the US?
I came to University of Southern California, and I spent 5 years over there. It was an enjoyable time. I spent under the supervision of Dr. Thomas Five. Most of the work was about enzyme kinetics, and I enjoyed that work a lot. I finished then in 1994, and at that time I decided to move out of California, and actually from the United States, and to go back to Europe. And then my road took me to Syria again, and I guess there was a taste for the challenge of being able to build something scientifically important under third world conditions. Part of that pushed me towards Syria. The other part is maybe subconsciously I wanted to show my parents, that I did the right choice, and I ended up doing a lot of things over there.
That's incredible. And you worked in academia over there, correct?
Well, I started by building a private lab. I have to say that before I went to Syria, I spent a year in a German clinical lab.
Okay. Because
I told myself, okay, I'm going to build a large clinical lab with modern clinical diagnostic in the Middle East. So I'm not trained for that. So I needed to visit all these sections, different sections that in principle are medical, clinical, laboratory medicine. when I finished that in about a year, I moved to Damascus and I got some help and I got my own money and built one of the largest lab there and introduced new clinical diagnostic, including molecular biology like PCR, and we introduced also prenatal chromosomal studies, clinical studies. We did also some paternity tests. All those were in the 1990s. That was in 1995. So these were actually new techniques that I introduced over there. And after a few years, I became acquainted with the dean of the Faculty of Medicine while trying to convince him to become a client of us. He actually approached me and told me, why don't you build a research lab at the Faculty of Medicine? And we need that. So I felt again the challenge because that was something new. So it will be a genetics lab, the first genetics lab at the Faculty of Medicine. And we needed about a year and a half to build that lab. And that wasn't easy at all. I mean, I was confronted with very, very adventurous items. Yeah.
There was quite a bit of unrest at that time too, so I'm sure you experienced quite a bit.
No, at that time it was quite quiet over there. The country was quiet. I mean, it's maybe the quiet state before the storm. But it's until 2011 that the unrest started. And in between, there was unrest where we were working, and the unrest resulted in me leaving, actually, the faculty, because I became a faculty member at that time. Faculty of Medicine, and I left the faculty because of, I would say, academic, political problems, you know. I left academia and I was assigned with a partner within the Ministry of Higher Education to build the National Commission for Biotechnology.
Oh, wow.
And that was a first tool for the country. So it was a national commission, but it was not just a commission. It was made mirroring the National Commission in India, which was endowed with laboratories, research, different specialties, and so on. Actually, I started that with a professor in agriculture, so I took the medical portion and he took the agricultural portion. So we had green biotech and we had red biotech, us being the red. Has nothing to do with politics. Yeah, so, and when we finished that commission, it was opened, I mean, officially opened. It was not really finished in terms of buildings and all that, but after I think about a year, we felt strong enough to open it, and it was opened by the Prime Minister from India and the President of Syria at that time. Yeah, so and that's when our journey started, and we ended up building an institution with about 120 researchers. We included industrial biotechnology that was not available, and it became also influential in pushing other countries towards biotechnology, such as Lebanon. So in Lebanon, they engaged also, our colleagues over there engaged other people to build up another institution over there in Tripoli. They had also a biotechnology institute in cooperation with the Lebanese university, and I went there also for teaching. So I had also teaching duties in a private university. They had built a private university at that time too. So that happens all before the 2011 unrest.
Wow.
Yeah, and because we were so engaged, and we had young people that were so engaged in science, and I was so impressed. The little salary we gave them, they had still this huge engagement. And during the war, the civil war, the students continued to work even under the threat of being harmed. And indeed, we had incidents where a shell actually came and destroyed a portion of our building. We had the rockets coming left and right, and we were next to an area that was actually quite dangerous. We still continued to practice science as much as we could, and I think that was fine. Sometimes I had some doubts about, should I risk these young people's coming and helping us doing this science. One of them I had to fish out from under the table after a bombing incident.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, not that he's damaged, but or harmed. He was afraid from the sound, of the bombing and all this. So it was on a volunteer basis, but still you had a responsibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this was a very difficult period because some of these young people actually participated in demonstration. Mm-hmm. I'm convinced most of them were peaceful demonstrations. And some of them got harmed through these demonstrations, and actually nobody felt secure at that time. And I was an employee of a public employee, although that does not exist like this, so I was more regarded like a governmental employee, since I belong to the Ministry of Higher Education. And my views at that time definitely did not harmonize with the official stand on things. I also decided earlier on, about a year or more before, because of my science, that I needed to move to a Western country to continue with certain aspects of science. Doing science in a third world is not easy at all. Although we had enough funding, we never had a problem with funding. Mm-hmm. We had the problem of securing instruments, securing material on time, and the infrastructure, and all these were challenges. We were progressing. For example, the faculty nearby acquired a new electron microscope, so another one acquired, another university did that too. So there was really a possibility to do serious science. When then the unrest came and the situation became very difficult and almost impossible to continue the science, I had also a personal incident where I actually was shot by my car was shot with with some kind of weapon, and during my driving in the freeway.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and I found I heard just a noise, a simple noise, and I found then the bullet behind my chair.
It just missed you.
It just missed you by a fraction, small fraction of a second.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So after that, I decided, if I die, that science I'm working with is gonna die with me most likely. So I better do something about it. So, and I decided to go either to Germany or to the United States. I wasn't decided yet, so I participated in 2 conferences. One in Frankfurt,
Okay.
and the other one was in Florida, in Orlando. Yeah. And of course, I'm familiar with the United States, I'm familiar with Germany, so the offer, however, was entirely different. In Germany, I had the chance, after talking and presenting at the conference, I met by accident a director, one of the directors of Max Planck Institute, and he offered me to connect with another director who is working on stem cells. And we had communication, so I was not sure whether should I go into academia again or research, or should I build a company for which the United States will be the perfect hub. And I decided at the end, to go for the second choice, and I came to Southern California.
What was your deciding factor in shying back away from academia and going into the private sector?
Yes. The main reason was a logical thought that those people who go to academia create discoveries that they then spin off into industry.
Mm-hmm.
I thought at that time that we have enough material that we produced academically or scientifically to try to move to the industry. So instead of going back to academia and research and then move into industry, I chose the shortest way.
You were already ready.
Yes, I felt ready. Let's go to the industry and let's apply this science and put it into use, because that's what matters most. We, as a biotechnology expert or as a biotechnology dedicated person, you want to see the fruits of your labor in terms of medicine, agriculture, industry, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So the science that you had been developing, is that what became the basis for the technology that is used at SMSbiotech?
Yes, indeed. I mean, we made the discovery in 2009 or 10, about that time. It started with a program that I wasn't so enthusiastic about at the beginning. I worked intensely on molecular epidemiology of Mycobacteria tuberculosis. And tuberculosis was an upcoming serious problem all over the world because of the AIDS epidemic and because of the appearance of multi-resistant strains. So if you had multi-resistant strains, the likelihood for death was quite high. I mean, it's approaching 40-50%.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought that we might counter that by trying to regenerate the lung. And regenerating the lung was a possibility by using stem cells. In theory, it was possible. So that's why we adopted that research proposal, and we went into stem cells. We went very open-minded, little background on that subject, and it made us actually discover the SMS cells, and we did some additional research to confirm it. Spent 1.5 years trying to negate their existence, and because I had a lot of doubt initially.
That's that agnostic base back in you from the philosophy.
Yes, indeed. It's you have to subject your ideas to a lot of critique before you face the world with them. You almost hope that any question anybody would ask you, you asked that question already yourself. Okay, so this is what I try to do, and I moved then into working on it, and then came the trouble with with the situation in the country, and I wanted to move that study away, and that's how I came to be in Southern California.
Well, we are very excited that you're here, and I am thoroughly enjoying this, but we definitely need to wrap up for time today. I would like to get into more of the story of the SMS cells at some point and maybe explain them so I can understand them.
Okay.
Before we go, though, do you have any advice that you would like to share with any of our aspiring scientists and biologists?
Oh, yeah, I think more of a general advice. You don't have to be a biologist, it's about having passion for what you do. It's about facing the difficulties with this passionate approach that that makes you really live your life in a very fulfilled way. So how would you create that passion? The passion can only be created by conviction, and conviction can be only gained starting from doubts. Okay, so when you want to anchor yourself into conviction, make sure that you have enough material for doubts. That means that you read a lot. At some point you reach a conclusion, you reach something, some enlightenment. Most likely it would be a book, it could be a person, it could be a sentence, whatever, but definitely you need to question this world, and I never stopped doing it.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you for everything that you're doing here. Everybody, thank you for your time with us. We look forward to meeting with you again. If you have any questions for Dr. Rahmo, please message us on all of our social media platforms or our website, www.smsbiotech.com, and we would love to get those answered for you. Take care.